The Douglas firs of Eugene do not merely grow, they loom, a deep prehistoric green that swallows the light in the most magnificent way possible. From my porch, the world looked as if it were filtered through a bottle of expensive gin, crisp, cool, and intoxicatingly quiet. I took a slow sip of the Pinot Noir, the vintage acting as a quiet celebration of my most recent conquest, a velvet sofa currently reigning over my living room. I had not even paused to check the balance in my checking account before swiping the card. It was not about the furniture, it was about the fact that no one was there to tell me it was the wrong color, or that the money should have been saved for the family, or that I was being selfish for wanting a soft place to land. The silence was a cathedral I had built brick by brick over 5 years. Then, the vibration on the wooden table shattered it. The screen flashed, "Grandma Edna." My heart did not just skip, it stalled. Edna was 88 years old, a fragile bird of a woman living in the crosshairs of my parents' neglect in Minnesota. She was the only thread I had not cut, the only person who knew my address, the only one I allowed through my firewall. "Grandma?" I answered, my voice tight with a sudden jagged panic. "Are you okay? Is something wrong?" There was no rasping, sweet greeting. Instead, there was a wet, heavy sound, the wheezing intake of breath I would recognize in a vacuum. It was the sound of a man who viewed every conversation as a deposition. "Your grandmother isn't dead, Caitlin." My father's voice crackled through the line, cold and surgically precise. "But she is old, and her house is very easy to enter if you have the key." The wine turned to vinegar on my tongue. A physical wave of nausea rolled over me, followed immediately by a cold, numbing rage. He had used her. He had gone into her home, taken the phone from her bedside, and used her name as bait. "Listen carefully," he continued, not waiting for a response. He never did. "You are flying to California this Friday. Aaron's rehearsal dinner is at the club. The bride's family, the Hargraves, they have expectations. They want to see a complete home, Caitlin. Not a fractured one. Your mother has been in bed for 3 days, hysterical, on enough sedatives to level a horse because of your absence. Are you really going to humiliate your brother? Are you really that small?" He paused, the silence on his end heavy with the expectation of my crumbling. He wanted the tears. He wanted the, "I'm sorry, Dad." He wanted the daughter who functioned as a prop in his staged play of American excellence. I looked out at the Douglas firs. They did not flinch. Neither did I. "You have the wrong number," I said. My voice was flat, a dead horizontal line on an EKG. I did not wait for the explosion. I tapped the red icon, ending the call, and watched the screen go black. The invasion had begun, but I had spent years fortifying the coast. The memories of Minnesota always arrived in shades of white. Not the pure, Christmas card white my mother posted on social media, but the blinding, sterile white of a hospital wing. I was 10 years old the first time I realized I was a ghost. I had won the state writing competition, a blue ribbon, and a certificate embossed with gold foil that felt like a passport to another world. I ran into the kitchen, the paper trembling in my hands, my heart hammering against my ribs. My mother was hovering over the ironing board, her face set in a mask of intense concentration as she pressed the creases into Aaron's tuxedo. She glanced at my certificate for exactly 3 seconds, the time it takes to recognize a piece of junk mail. "That's nice, Katie," she murmured, her eyes already darting back to the polyester fabric. "Put it on the counter, and move, you're blocking the light." The certificate stayed on the counter until it was stained by a ring of coffee from my father's mug. By evening, it was in the recycling bin. 3 years later, the white was the color of the snow outside our suburban fortress. I was 13, and my lungs felt as if they were filled with wet wool. Pneumonia had turned my breath into a shallow burning struggle, and the thermometer read 102.4 degrees Fahrenheit. I wanted my bed. I wanted a dark room. "Get your coat on, Caitlin." "The heavy one," my mother commanded, her voice bright and brittle. She was applying a fresh layer of peach-colored lipstick in the hallway mirror. "Mom, I can't," I whispered, my throat feeling as though it had been scraped with glass. "I'm dizzy. I think I'm going to throw up." She turned, her eyes narrowing. There was no pity there, only a sharp, calculating assessment, of how my illness would affect the vibe. "We are a united family," she said, her tone as hard as the lipstick tube. "Aaron is starting as striker today. The scouts are coming. Do you have any idea how it looks if his sister is too tired to support him? People ask questions, Caitlin. They wonder if there is trouble at home. Now, put on the coat, stand in the stands, and smile. It is only 3 hours." I stood in that snow for 3 hours. I cheered when the crowd cheered, my teeth chattering so hard I thought they would shatter. I was a background extra in the Aaron show, a shivering accessory designed to prove that the Miller household was a place of warmth and support. I was not a child. I was a placeholder for a daughter they actually wanted. The certificate was recycled, the fever eventually broke, but the cold of that Minnesota soccer field had settled into my marrow, a permanent frost that no Oregon summer could ever truly thaw. Back in Eugene, the sun began to dip below the tree line, casting long, skeletal shadows across my porch. I looked at the phone in my hand, the small, glowing rectangle that connected me to the ghosts of Minnesota. I took another sip of wine. It was cold. It was crisp. It was mine. The hang-up did not end the war. It merely shifted the theater of operations. In my world, a 404 not found is a clean break, but in my parents' world, silence is an invitation for an escalated volume. The digital terrorism began precisely 30 minutes after I ended the call. My phone, the one I kept on the mahogany nightstand beside my expensive, silent bed, began to jitter like a live wire. Because I had not yet blocked Grandma Edna's number, they had an open port. They flooded it. The first ping was a photo. I did not have to open it to know what it was, but the engineer in me is a masochist for data. I tapped the screen. It was me at age 5, a gap-toothed blur in a sun-faded dress, holding Aaron's hand. I looked happy, but I remember that day. I was only holding his hand because Mother had promised me a juice box if I did not look sullen for the camera. "You used to be such a sweet child." The text underneath read, "I don't know what I did wrong to make you so heartless toward the family that raised you." Then came the voicemail from my father. I did not listen to it at full volume. I played it through a transcription app, watching his rage turn into sanitized, gray text. "I regret ever indulging your selfishness. You are destroying your brother. This wedding is his moment, and you are a cancer on it." The word cancer did not hurt. It was too hyperbolic, a bug in his logic. If I were a cancer, why was he so desperate to have me in the front row of the wedding photos? "You do not invite a tumor to a rehearsal dinner unless the tumor is actually a necessary prop for the complete family set piece." Then, the final volley, Aunt Martha. The family's designated enforcer of guilt. "Caitlin, honey, come home. Your mother has not eaten in days. She is completely falling apart. She is on sedatives just to stop the shaking." I opened a private browser on my laptop. I did not go to Grandma's phone or my father's curated LinkedIn. I went to my mother's public Facebook profile, accessed through a burner account I used for threat assessment. There she was, posted 2 hours ago. The image was high definition, saturated with the golden light of a California afternoon. She was wearing a silk Diane von Furstenberg wrap dress, the kind that costs $1,200. She was laughing, a mimosa held aloft like a trophy, standing on the manicured green of a golf club. The caption was a masterpiece of performative bliss, living my best life for these glorious days, counting down to the big I do. The falling apart was a script. The sedatives were likely just the champagne. She was not shaking. She was vibrating with the thrill of being the center of a high society event. I stared at the screen until the blue light burned my retinas. The mask of virtue was firmly in place, held up by the same structural lies that had built my childhood. The clipping of wings is a quiet process. It does not happen with a roar. It happens with a series of small, polite snips. By age 15, I had stopped looking for blue ribbons. I had discovered C++ and Python, languages that did not care about family vibes or whether I was smiling. I had ranked top in the state for a coding competition, a feat that actually came with a small cash prize of $500. I did not tell them. I knew better. The confrontation happened during one of Aaron's celebratory barbecues. He had been named Most Improved on the junior varsity team, a participation trophy for a boy who had been given every private coach money could buy. The backyard was filled with the smell of expensive brisket and the sound of my father's booming laugh. I was in my room, the door shut, lost in a sea of logic gates. The door flew open. My mother stood there, her face flushed with the joy of hosting. "What are you doing, Caitlin? Everyone is asking where you are." "I am working on a project, Mom. I am almost finished with the script." "You are hiding," she corrected, the word landing like a slap. "You are ruining the vibe. You are making people think you are jealous of your brother. Get downstairs, grab a plate, and act like you belong to this family." "I am not jealous," I said, my voice rising. "I am just busy. Why is his JV award more important than the fact that I have worked my fingers to the bone for you," she shrieked, the transition from hostess to victim happening in a millisecond. "Why do you always play the victim? Why do you have to be so difficult when your brother is finally succeeding?" The gaslighting was a refined art. By the time I was 18, I realized it was not just about my vibe, it was about my utility. The lethal blow came in the spring of my senior year. I had won a partial scholarship to the University of Minnesota. It was not a full ride, but it was enough to make the dream visible. All I needed was to file the FAFSA. And for that, I needed my parents' tax returns. I sat them down in the dining room. I had a folder. I had a plan. "I will not sign it," my father said before I could even open the folder. He did not even look at the papers. He was looking at a brochure for a private business college in Chicago, Aaron's dream school, where tuition was $45,000 a year. "Dad, it is just a signature. It does not cost you anything. It just lets me get the loans for the rest of the tuition." "It does cost us, Caitlin," he said, finally meeting my eyes. There was a cold, calculated malice there that I had not seen before. "If you go away to school, who is going to help your mother with the house? Who is going to keep things running here while we focus on Aaron? He has real leadership potential. He needs to network, join a frat, build a legacy. The family money, every cent of it is going toward his degree." "But I have a scholarship," I yelled. "I am not asking for your money. I am asking for a signature." "That school only gave you a scholarship because they need to fill a female quota," he sneered, leaning forward. "You are smart, sure, but Aaron is the one who will carry the name. You can go to the local community college. You can live here, save us the room and board, and do your part. Don't be so utterly selfish." They did not lack the money. They had just decided that my future was a fair price to pay for Aaron's comfort. They wanted a domestic servant, a ghost in the hallway to manage the chores while they paraded the golden sun. I did not cry. The tear ducts had dried up somewhere around age 13 inches the snow. Instead, I took a job scrubbing dishes at a local diner, then a second job waitressing until 2 a.m. in the morning. I spent my freshman and sophomore years at that community college, but I never stepped foot in my parents' house for a meal. I slept on a mattress in a shared apartment that smelled like stale grease and desperation. When I finally earned my software engineering degree, I did not have a graduation party. I did not invite them to see me walk across the stage. I spent that afternoon packing a beat-up Honda Civic with everything I owned: 3 boxes of books, a laptop, and a single set of silverware I had bought at a thrift store. I drove straight to Eugene, Oregon. There were 2,000 miles of blacktop between me and the perfect family. I did not leave a note. I did not make a scene. I just stopped being a ghost in their house and became a person in my own life. For 5 years, the silence was perfect. They did not even notice I was gone at first. I was a ghost after all. It was not until Aaron's wedding loomed, until they needed the complete family for the Hargraves inspection, that they realized the prop was missing. I looked at the phone again. The screen was still lit with my mother's best life photo. They had found my address because I had trusted Grandma Edna. I had sent her pressed flower cards. I had given her my coordinates because I thought love was a safe harbor.
I had not realized that for my parents, love was just another data point to be exploited. They thought they had clipped my wings to keep me in the nest, but they forgot one thing. A bird with no home learns to fly much further.
As 9 p.m. approached on Friday, the rain finally arrived in Eugene. It was not a storm. It was a persistent, needle-like drizzle that blurred the edges of the Douglas firs until they looked like charcoal sketches against a bruised purple sky. I sat in the dark of my living room, the only light coming from the glowing amber standby light of my stereo and the occasional flash of a passing car's headlights reflecting off my new sofa. I was waiting for the final act. I knew how my father operated. He would not stop at the digital bombardment. He would be at the rehearsal dinner now, holding court, weaving a tapestry of lies to explain why his daughter, the successful lead engineer, was not standing by his side. When the phone rang, it was not Grandma Edna's hijacked number. It was a California area code I did not recognize. I picked it up on the third ring. I did not say hello. I waited for the world to come to me. "Caitlin?" The voice was unfamiliar, cool, measured, and layered with the distinct, sharp edge of someone who spent her days drafting contracts and spotting loopholes. It was Sarah, Aaron's fiancée. I had seen her in the engagement photos my mother had leaked to social media, a woman with a high-maintenance ponytail and the weary eyes of a high achiever. "This is Caitlin," I said. I reached for my wine, but the glass was empty. I did not bother to refill it. "I am sorry to call you so late," Sarah said. In the background, I could hear the muffled, expensive clink of silverware against china and the low, rolling thunder of a country club party. "I am Sarah, Aaron's." "Well, for the next 12 hours, his fiancée. The phrasing was interesting. For the next 12 hours. "I know who you are, Sarah," I said. "Congratulations, or perhaps my condolences. I am not sure which is more appropriate yet." There was a beat of silence. Sarah did not gasp. She did not get defensive. That was a good sign. "I am calling because I am a lawyer, Caitlin," she said, her voice dropping an octave as she moved, presumably into a quieter hallway. "And I have spent the last 3 hours listening to your father tell the Hargrave family, my family, about your incredible career in New York. He told everyone you are heading a Tier 1 emergency security project for a data center in Manhattan. He even toasted to the thoughtful, hand-carved wedding gift you sent from an artisan shop in Brooklyn. He said you were devastated. You could not leave the command center to be here." I smiled into the dark. It was a cold, jagged expression. My father was a storyteller. He just lacked the discipline to stay within the realm of the verifiable. "Is that right?" I asked. "A hand-carved gift. He really has a flair for the specific, doesn't he?" "That's the thing," Sarah continued, and I could hear the sound of a pen clicking, a nervous habit of a woman who dealt in evidence. "I checked your LinkedIn tonight. I wanted to send a proper thank you card to your office, but your profile says you have been a senior developer in Eugene, Oregon for 3 years. Then I ran a quick search. This number is registered to an address in the Pacific Northwest. So, I have to ask, did you just transfer to the East Coast this morning? Or is my future father-in-law a pathological liar?" I stood up and walked to the window. The rain was streaking the glass, distorting the world outside into a series of melting shapes. "Sarah," I said, my voice as steady as the code I write. "I have not been in New York in 10 years. I live in a cabin in the woods outside Eugene. I sent no gift. In fact, I have not spoken to my parents or my brother in 5 years. I cut them off to escape 20 years of psychological and financial abuse. They lied to you because they are terrified of the one thing they cannot control, the truth. They cannot stomach the shame of admitting the daughter they tried to break is the one who chose to leave them." The silence on the other end was absolute. It was the sound of a vacuum forming. I could almost feel the weight of the realization hitting her, the realization that she was about to marry into a house built on a foundation of rot and performance. "He lied about the gift," she whispered, more to herself than to me. "He looked my father in the eye and described the craftsmanship of a gift that does not exist." "He has been describing things that do not exist my entire life, Sarah," I said. "He described a happy home while I was shivering in the snow with pneumonia. He described family unity while he was refusing to sign my financial aid forms so he could spend my college fund on Aaron's frat dues. This is not a glitch in his personality. It is the operating system." I see, Sarah said. Her voice was no longer cool, it was brittle. I have to go back in there. Thank you for your honesty, Caitlin. Truly. Good luck, Sarah, I said. I hung up. I did not feel a rush of triumph. I just felt a profound sense of exhaustion. I went to the kitchen, finally refilled my glass, and sat back down on my sofa. I watched the clock. The collapse happened with the arrival of dawn. I did not need to be there to see it. I saw it through the digital debris left in the wake of the explosion. By 8 a.m., my mother's best life post had been deleted. By 9 a.m., the wedding guest group chat was a flurry of confused, panicked messages. Does anyone know what happened? The Hargraves just sent an email. The ceremony is cancelled. I heard Sarah left in the middle of the night. Is it true about Aaron's sister? The perfect family facade had not just cracked. It had suffered a total structural failure in front of every social peer my parents had spent 30 years trying to impress. The Hargraves, old money, and obsessed with integrity, had clearly been given the corrected data by Sarah. The morning sun in Oregon was weak, struggling to break through the clouds, but it felt like a spotlight. For 5 years I had been the one hiding. I had been the problem child, whose name was whispered in hushed, disappointed tones. Now, the light was on them. My phone began to buzz again. Not calls this time, texts. Short, jagged bursts of pure, unadulterated venom. From my mother. You have killed us. I hope you are happy. You have destroyed your brother's life for a grudge. You are a monster. From my father. We know where you are, Caitlin. Oregon is not as far away as you think. This is not over. I did not block them. I did not delete the messages. I sat at my dining table, opened a fresh document on my laptop, and began to log every single one. I time-stamped them. I took screenshots. I was no longer the one of 3-year-old girl in the heavy coat, trying to stay warm in the shadows. I was an engineer, and I was building a case. The wedding was dead. The golden sun was tarnished. The curator was exposed. They were cornered, and I knew from years of experience that a cornered miller did not retreat. They lashed out. They used the only weapons they had left, the law and the proximity they had stolen from Grandma Edna. I looked at the "We know where you are" text. I felt a chill, but it was not the old fear. It was the thrill of a counter-strategy finally clicking into place. They thought they were the hunters. They did not realize that by lying to Sarah, they had given me the one thing I needed to finish this, a public, verifiable record of their instability. I took a sip of wine. It was barely 10 a.m., but the rules of the perfect family no longer applied. I had severed the line, but the weight of the cable was still falling. The silence of a Saturday night in the Oregon woods is never truly empty. It is filled with the rhythmic clicking of cooling engines, the sigh of wind through the Douglas firs, and the distant, lonely call of an owl. But tonight, the silence felt like a held breath. I sat in my darkened living room, the glow of my laptop screen casting a pale, clinical blue light across my face. I was waiting for the backlash. In the physics of my family, every action has an equal and opposite overreaction. By now, the wreckage of the wedding would be complete. The caterers would be packing up uneaten lobster tails. The Hargraves would be drafting "I told you so" emails. And my parents would be in a hotel room in California, vibrating with the kind of humiliated fury that usually results in a scorched earth policy. The knock came at 10:42 p.m. It was the heavy, authoritative thud of gloved knuckles on solid wood. The flash rhythmic, strobing bursts of red and blue reflecting off the wet needles of the trees outside. I did not flinch. I did not even stand up immediately. I saved my work, closed the laptop, and took a slow, grounding breath. This was the move I had anticipated. When you can no longer control the person, you attempt to control the narrative of their sanity. I opened the door to find 2 Lane County Sheriff's deputies. They were framed by the darkness, their silhouettes tall and imposing, their hands resting habitually near their belts. Behind them, the patrol car sat idling, its lights painting my sanctuary in the colors of an emergency. "Caitlin Miller?" the older officer asked. His voice was pitched in that specific frequency used for the potentially volatile, low, calm,
and patronizing. Yes, I said. I did not open the door wider. I stood my ground, my posture as straight as a line of code. How can I help you, officers? We received a call from your parents, he said, glancing past me into the house, looking for the signs of the severe mental instability they had undoubtedly described. They are very concerned. They claimed you have a history of self-harm and that you have made some disturbing statements over the phone tonight. They requested a wellness check. They were worried you might be a danger to yourself. The wellness check. The ultimate weapon of the suburban aggressor. It was a brilliant, tactical move. Use the police as a proxy to kick down the door I had locked, force me into a state of visible panic, and then use that panic as proof that I was falling apart. If they could not have me at the wedding, they would have me in a psychiatric hold. I see, I said. My voice was a flat, cool lake. May I invite you in? It is a bit cold for the neighbors to be watching this performance. The officers exchanged a look, the silent communication of men who had expected a screaming woman and found a statue instead. They stepped inside. I am perfectly fine, I said, walking toward the kitchen island where my phone sat. I am a senior software engineer. I worked 6 hours today. I have no history of mental instability, though I do have a documented history of being harassed by the people who called you. Your father sounded very distraught, ma'am, the younger officer said, his eyes scanning the room. He saw the expensive sofa, the half-finished glass of wine, the clean, organized space. It did not look like the den of a woman in crisis. Distraught is my father's default setting when he loses a power struggle, I replied. I picked up my phone. Would you like to hear the disturbing statements I made, or would you prefer to hear the messages they have been leaving me? I did not wait for an answer. I opened the voice-to-text app and played the message my father had left 3 hours ago. I turned the volume all the way up. We know where you are, Caitlin. The wheezing, distorted voice filled the kitchen. It sounded like a threat from a low-budget thriller. You think you are safe behind that little door in Oregon? You have humiliated this family for the last time. If you don't call your mother and apologize for the lies you told Sarah, I will make sure the world knows exactly how sick you are. We will have you picked up, Caitlin. We will see how your job feels about a daughter in a padded room. I stopped the recording. The silence that followed was heavy. The older officer's expression shifted from professional concern to the weary realization that he had been used as a pawn in a very ugly game. That message was received at 7:14 p.m., I said. I did not respond. This wellness check isn't an act of mercy. It is an act of swatting. It is an attempt to use your badges to humiliate me and force a contact I have explicitly refused. I walked over to my laptop and pulled up a PDF. This is a log I have been keeping. It includes every text, every hijacked call from my grandmother's phone, and the screenshots of my mother's Facebook posts from today, proving she was at a party while claiming to be on sedatives because of my disappearance. I turned the screen toward them. I want an incident report filed tonight. I want it noted that this call was made in bad faith. And I will be using that report on Monday morning to file for a stalking protective order in Lane County Circuit Court. The younger officer began to take notes. The older one sighed, his shoulders dropping. They had seen this before, the wreckage of the American family disguised as a well-meaning intervention. We will file the report, Miss Miller, the older deputy said. His tone had lost the patronizing edge. It was now the tone of a person speaking to an equal. I am sorry for the intrusion. We have to follow up on these calls, but it is clear you are not in any danger from yourself. I am in danger from them, I corrected, and I'd like that noted as well. I watched them walk back to their cruiser from the porch. The red and blue lights died, replaced by the mundane yellow of my porch light. They drove away, leaving me alone in the dark once again. I should have felt relieved. I had turned the law against their last weapon. I had documented their malice. But as I stood there, the cold night air biting at my skin, a new, sharper pain began to bloom in my chest. To file that protective order, I would have to bring Grandma Edna's phone into the light. I would have to admit, legally and permanently, that the people who gave me life were the greatest threat to it. I went back inside and looked at the phone. One new notification. A text from Grandma's number. It was not my father this time. "Katie, are you there? The men were here. They took my phone. They were shouting, 'I am scared, honey.'" It was a trap, or it was the truth. In this house of mirrors, I could not tell anymore. And that was the cruelest part of their design. They had turned my only source of love into a landmine.
I stood in my living room, the darkness pressed against the windows, and looked down at my phone. The text from Grandma Edna sat there like a ticking bomb. "I am scared, honey." My thumbs hovered over the glass. My heart, that traitorous organ, wanted to type, "I am so sorry, Grandma. I will come get you. I will fix this." But the engineer in my brain, the one who had survived the Minnesota winters and the financial starvation of my youth, stopped me. I looked at the syntax of her message. Grandma Edna did not use the word scared. She used frightened. She did not call the police the men. She called them the officers. It was a ghost-written plea. My father was likely standing over her shoulder in that cramped little house in St. Paul, dictating the words, watching the typing, bubbles with the hunger of a predator. He was using her fragility as a hook, hoping my empathy would override my logic. He knew she was the only port left open in my firewall. To keep her was to keep them. As long as I held that phone, as long as I answered her calls, I was leaving a back door open for the people who had tried to bury me. They would use her medications, her loneliness, and her eventual funeral as leverage until the day I broke. I walked to my kitchen table and opened my laptop. The blue light felt like a cold compress on my tired eyes. I didn't open my personal email. I opened my secure work portal and drafted a message to my attorney. "On Monday, I need you to hire an elder care management agency in the Twin Cities. I want top-tier, 24/7 oversight for Edna Miller. I will pay for everything: medications, private nursing, grocery delivery anonymously. The funds will come through a blind trust. Under no circumstances is my name, my location, or my contact information to be shared with her or her immediate family. If my parents attempt to interfere, the agency is to document it as elder abuse and contact the authorities immediately. Also, please begin the process of freezing my public records and changing my legal service address to your firm's P.O. box." I hit send. The whoosh sound of the outgoing mail felt like a guillotine blade dropping. I was providing for her. I was protecting her, but I was also abandoning her to the silence. I was paying for her safety with my absence. It was a cold, utilitarian trade, the kind of moral math that leaves a permanent scar on the soul. I picked up the phone. I didn't look at the text again. I used a small metal tool to pop the SIM card tray. The little sliver of plastic and silicon sat in the palm of my hand, a tiny gold-plated key to my past. I took a pair of heavy-duty kitchen shears. Snip. The card didn't just break, it shattered. The digital trail ended there. No more Grandma Edna flashing on the screen. No more wheezing voicemails from a man who viewed me as a prop. No more guilt trips from a mother who curated her grief like a Pinterest board. I stepped out onto the porch and stared into the deep, brooding green of the Douglas firs. The Oregon rain would wash away the calls. The forest would swallow the memories. I was finally, truly, alone. The arrival of Monday morning brought the usual atmosphere of the tech sector, the smell of overpriced artisanal coffee, the hum of high-end air filtration systems, and the relentless, "Cheery, how was your weekend?" refrain of people whose families don't use the police as a tactical weapon. I sat at my desk, my 3 monitors glowing with lines of elegant, logical code. I felt light. Not the lightness of joy, but the lightness of a ghost. I had spent the morning confirming the trust for Edna and signing the final paperwork for my stalking protective order. The Severed project was complete. "Hey Caitlin," a voice chirped from the next cubicle. It was Sloane, from Quality Assurance. She was holding a pistachio latte and looking at me with the casual curiosity of the well-adjusted. "You look rested," she said, leaning against the partition. "Did you do anything fun?" "My weekend was a nightmare. My sisters and I spent the whole time arguing over our mom's birthday dinner. Honestly, family, right? They are just loud and chaotic." Sometimes I think I'd be better off in a cave." I looked at her. I saw the genuine, low-stakes annoyance in her eyes. To her, family drama meant a disagreement over a restaurant reservation. It didn't mean a cancelled wedding, a faked suicide threat, or a shattered SIM card. "What about you?" she asked, oblivious to the chasm between us. "Do you have any siblings you have to deal with? Or are you one of the lucky ones?" I looked out the floor-to-ceiling windows. Beyond the glass, the Oregon mountains stood in a line of silent, gray majesty. They didn't ask for anything. They didn't lie. They just existed, massive and immovable. I thought of Aaron, the golden child who is currently sitting in the wreckage of a cancelled life, probably blaming me for the fact that his fiancée had seen behind the curtain. I thought of the boy who had ironed jerseys while I had pneumonia, the boy who had been built out of the pieces they had stolen from me. I realized then that Aaron wasn't my brother. He was a project I had been forced to fund, and that project was over. I looked Sloane in the eye. I didn't hesitate. I didn't flinch. I felt the final stitch in my new life pull tight, closing the wound for good. "No," I said, my voice firm and clear. "I don't have any siblings. I'm an only child." Sloane laughed, a bright, careless sound. "Lucky you! No one to fight with over the holidays." "Exactly," I said. I turned back to my screen. I pulled up a fresh script. The code was clean, the logic was sound, and for the first time in 28 years, there were no bugs in the system. I began to type, the rhythmic clicking of the keys, the only sound in my world. I was an only child. I was a software engineer. I was a homeowner in Eugene, Oregon, and I was free. The price of freedom was an empty chair at a table I would never return to, and a lie that had finally become the truest thing about me.